Assalamualaikum and good afternoon to the third year students of the College of Social Sciences and Humanities, Department of Psychology and Related Services, to the students enrolled in PSY 124 under Ma'am Nurhamida Abantas. I would like first to thank the organizer for having me or inviting me as a resource speaker and as a part of this webinar entitled Communication in a Team Environment. So I am Engineer Jamaline G. Darimbang, and I am tasked to talk about the organizational communication and I would like to ask everyone to let me have the convenience to share my knowledge and experience as a former chairperson of the socio-civic youth-oriented organization based in the Mindanao State University Marawi campus known as Inspired Young Optimist Guild or IYOG. So I am tasked to talk about the organizational communication, and this may be recorded beforehand, but I would still ask the participants and listeners to still cooperate and listen with the lecture. So first, let's talk about interpersonal communication. Interpersonal communication involves the exchange of a message across a communication channel from one person to another. So meaning, interpersonal, hindi lang siya communication sa sarili mo, but we talk about interpersonal communication which is communication sa ibang tao. So meron iba't ibang klase ng communication, but this time, we have to focus on the interpersonal communication which is you and involving another person or you communicating to another person. So the interpersonal communication process begins with the sender encoding and transmitting a message across a communication channel. So for example, if a person wants to say something, he or she first thinks about what he or she wants to say and transmits the message across a communication channel, which is usually our mouth or our use of words or sometimes writing. So then, this ends with another person or the receiver receiving and decoding the message. So upon hearing the words or upon listening to the person, the receiver also decodes the message or gives meaning to the words he or she heard or gives meaning to the kinds of tone or gesture or facial expression that he or she can see. Although this seemed like a simple process, there are three main problem areas that can go wrong and interfere with the transmission of the reception of the message. So, um, sa lahat naman siguro ng communication, may mga problems tayong na-encounter, endless problems or endless barriers in our communication. So, sa organization namin, we call them barriers, but in this lecture, we call them problem areas. So, we have to focus on these main problems for us to discuss more about this organizational communication. So, first is the problem area 1, which is the intended message versus the message sent. So sometimes we have this kind of idea or we have these words that we want to say to someone, but sometimes depending on our tone, they're taken as an offensive or insult to the person. So for example, I want to communicate with my junior, or I want to acknowledge the accomplishment of my juniors, but I just use the sarcastic tone. So this can be received as an insult to them instead of encouragement. So they may feel discouraged, they may feel disappointed with themselves if they receive from me a tone that is not really a tone of one complimenting the other. So 'di ba, kahit gusto nating sabihin yung mga naiisip natin or yung nararamdaman natin, sometimes they are taken wrongly or they're misunderstood because of some factors. So how do we avoid this problem? So there are three things or suggested ways or solution how to avoid this. First solution is think about what you want to communicate. So when you want to tell something to the person, you always have to think how you tell to that person, or when you have the idea of what you want to say to the person, you have to think first before you speak. So for example, in a situation where you're a student and you have you haven't passed your requirement, or you want to pass your requirement beyond deadline. So for example, your teacher is asking you, Miss Darimbang, why is your requirement late? So can you answer with, ma'am, hindi ko po alam, or ma'am, I don't know po. So you have to think beforehand. You have to prove na, or you have to compose yourself and answer confidently and eloquently, and you have to think of choosing your own words. So you have to be honest. I was late po kasi ganito ganyan. I was late po because I had errands to run in the house, or I was late po because our internet connection was poor. And you have to be formal, and you have to choose your tone of voice. If you answer with your teacher in a friendly manner, it will not it will not it will the message will not be received as what you want it to be received by your teacher. So another example is talking to your parents. So when you are late at your home, or when you have forgotten to do something, do you answer your parents with, I don't know, or it depends, or bahala na? No, you don't answer that way. So you have to answer respectfully, and you have to answer in a manner that you want to be understood, and you want to understand your parents. So thinking about what you want to say is, composing yourself and talking in a way that is acceptable to the other person. So um in this solution, you also have to practice talking with people, and asking how they feel about you speaking the message, or you assess yourself and evaluate yourself, how you speak, or how your tone changes, or how your facial expression can convey to the people, or how your message is being received. So next is practicing what you want to communicate. So after evaluating yourself, assessing yourself on how you talk, or how your tone changes, or how your facial expression shows, or how your gesture moves, or your hands move, or how you choose your words, you also have to practice how to communicate. So you practice adapting to your tone of voice, like how soft and how loud and how high pitch, or how deep your voice gets. So we have to learn how to communicate and practice them in a way that we talk to people, or we try communicating with people and asking them how they feel, or ano kaya yung naririnig nila sa atin, and sometimes asking a person about how they see you, or what's their impression of you, can help in assessing yourself in how you communicate with people. Kasi sometimes some people can tell you na maldita ka or maldito ka, but you feel like you're mabait naman, you're kind naman to other people, and you don't know na maldita ka pala sa ibang tao. So maybe there's a problem in how they hear your tone of voice, or how they see your facial expression. So you practice and you ask other people, you evaluate yourself, and you start practicing your communication. So next is learn better communication skills. So after you practice this communication, or your way of communicating, so you learn communication skills. What are these communication skills? So one example that I can share is learning how to be formal in choosing your words. So, for example, when you're talking to a teacher, is different on how you talk with your classmate, or how you talk with your friend. So, when you talk with your friend, it's okay to use bro, or pare, or beshi, or you use shortcut terms like LOL, or talk to you later, TTYL, or take care. So you don't talk like that to a teacher or your boss. So when you talk to your teacher or your boss, you use formal words, respectful words, and of course, words that are collegiate. Dahil college students na tayo, we use collegiate words. So I think that's one part of communication skills. Other one is using proper gesture when you're talking. So when you talk, you don't always scratch your head or pick your nose or move so freely or make unnecessary movements. So with these gestures, you have to know how to speak formally, how to use your hands in a, in a formal way in public speaking skills. So there are so many skills that you can learn and you can study in communication. So in written communication naman, you can have formal letters. You learn how to be formal, and in a friendly manner, you also have that skill of controlling your words or choosing the right words to the right person, or being respectful depending on the person you're talking with. So there are so many communication skills actually, and you can study that and you can practice and learn them. So let's move on to the problem area 2. Problem area 2 is message sent versus message received. Even though an individual knows what she wants to say or says it exactly as she planned, many factors affect how the message is received. So one thing is that the actual words used. A particular word may mean one thing in one situation but something else in another. So for example, yung word na fine, yung FINE. So if I told you that you had a fine jewelry, you would probably take the statement as a compliment. So kung gagamitin naman siya sa weather, the weather here in the Philippines is just fine. It would still have a positive connotation. Pero kung yung kasama mo or yung best friend mo is alam mong meron kang pinagsamahan na malaki, pero tinanong mo siya, Besh, how are you feeling today? So, sasabihin niya, Besh, I'm fine. So, sometimes, hindi yun yung natitake natin na message. Sometimes, kahit sinabi niyang fine siya, we still have that doubt na hindi pa siya fine or hindi pa siya okay. So, a particular word may also, there are so many words or phrases that are carefully spoken or carefully said to a person pero hindi pa rin siya yung nakukuha natin na meaning ng words because of how we feel or how we think or how we believe that a person telling us that kind of message. So another thing is the communication channel. So problems in communication can occur as a result of the communication channel through which the message is transmitted. Information can be communicated in many ways such as orally or yung bibig natin, non-verbally or yung gestures natin, or through a second party or through a written medium such as letter or a memo. So the same message can be interpreted in different ways because or based on the channel used to communicate it. So, for example, may gusto kang sabihin sa junior mo or sa kaibigan mo, pero hindi mo pa siya magawang sabihin kaya sinabi mo muna sa friend mo or sa closest friend mo. So, sometimes, yung closest friend mo, siya pa yung nagiging communication channel mo at nung taong yon na gusto mong pagsabihan. So this communication channel can also be a factor kung bakit nagkakaroon ng maling reception of message. So sometimes even if kahit actual or real situation yung sinabi mo sa closest friend mo, pero dahil siya yung communication channel, the other or different things na yung sinasabi niya. Minsan nasosobrahan, minsan nakukulangan, and minsan nalalagyan pa ng feelings or overreactions kaya nagkakaroon ng misunderstanding. So one factor also is the noise or yung ingay sa paligid natin. So the noise surrounding a transmission channel can also affect the way a message is received. So noise can be defined as any interference that affects proper reception of a message. So one obvious example is the actual auditory noise such as the sound of the traffic or yung mga horn or yung mga beep ng ating mga sasakyan. Or even kahit yung silence ng mga tao, natitake din siya as a barrier to your communication. So kung magsasalita ka tapos biglang na-silent yung mga tao, di ba parang nakaka-pressure magsalita or baka may nasabi kang mali. So kahit na tama yung sinasabi mo, or kahit na wala namang masama sa mga sinasabi mo, dahil sa noise or dahil sa silence ng mga tao, nafe-feel mo na parang may mali kang sinabi. So, another one is the non-verbal cues. So much of what we communicate is conveyed by non-verbal means. So our words often say one thing, but our actions say another. Ika nga nila, actions speak louder than words, diba? So, for example, if someone is telling her opinions, tapos yung isa is interested sa kanyang opinion, and nakikita niya na yung opinion ng isang tao is or she's telling her opinion in a way na naka-frown siya or naka-furrow yung eyebrows niya, kahit na hindi naman siya galit, is nakikita ng mga tao na parang galit naman siya. So, usong-uso sa atin yung, bakit ka galit? Usong-uso sa atin yan, di ba? So, ang sinasabi din ng tao, hindi naman ako galit, nagpapaliwanag lang, di ba? So, sometimes, nami-misinterpret talaga yung actions natin. Instead of the message na nare-receive nila, mas tinitingnan pa nila yung actions natin. Non-verbal cues can be divided into 5 categories. One is body language, paralanguage, use of space, use of time, and artifacts. So body language is about how we move and position our body. Or our body language is something na nagko-communicate with other people using our body. So when body faces another person, it is often interpreted as a sign of liking, or whereas when a person's body is turned away from another, it is often misinterpreted as a sign of dislike or lack of interest. So, ang dami-daming body language actually na nag-exist sa atin, yung kahit konting kibot lang natin, is binibigyan na ng meaning. Diba? Agree naman kayo doon. So, another thing is the use of space. Use of space is the way or ways the ways people make use of space also provides non-verbal cues about their feelings and personality. So sometimes, kung sino pa yung may authority are given more space by others and at the same time, take space from others. So, di ba alam natin na meron talagang mas malaking office si boss kesa sa regular employees. Or sometimes, sa mismong classroom natin, the teacher has the table and the students have the chairs. So, the use of space din. Another thing is the use of time. The way people make use of time is another element of nonverbal communication. So, kunwari, pumasok ka ng 8:10 a.m. Tapos, ang klase nyo is 8 o'clock a.m. You are already judged as a latecomer, or forever ka na sigurong latecomer, or someone na hindi nagsisipag mag-aral, diba? So, we often take messages with the use of time. Another thing is the paralanguage. So, what is paralanguage? It involves the way we say things and consists of variables such as tone, tempo, volume, number, and duration of pauses, and rate of speech. Ito yung nababanggit ko kanina na kung yung tono ng boses mo is nag-change, or yung kung paano ka magsalita ng mga words, or paano mo nilalagyan ng diin yung each word. So, that is called paralanguage. So, next is the artifacts. So, a final element of nonverbal communication concerns the objects or artifacts, or yung sinasabi natin sa normal or layman's term na may pa-props si ate girl, ganon. So, a person wears or with which she surrounds herself. So, a person who wears bright and colorful clothes is often perceived differently from a person who wears conservative white or gray clothing. So, sometimes talaga dinidefine ng mga tao kung ano ka based talaga sa mga suot mo or sa kung anong merong gamit ka. So, another thing is the amount of information. So, the amount of information contained in a message can affect the accuracy which it is received. So, when a message contains more information than we can hold in memory, the information becomes leveled, sharpened, and assimilated. So, for example, if your instructor instructed you to call Miss Darimbang in a situation, Miss Balt, I want you to call Miss Darimbang, and the person who gets the instruction sees that the instructor has furrowed eyebrows or looking angry, or you get intimidated with the facial expression, and you see the instructor holding, let's say, a red notebook, and you think that the notebook is owned by Miss Darimbang. So if the person goes to Miss Darimbang and says all the information, and it becomes accurate that Miss Darimbang has to prepare for something that the instructor wants to say, or the instructor might tell something that Miss Darimbang must be intimidated of. So when you level some of the information, the unimportant details are removed. So um, um, in telling something or information, there are so many unimportant things na hindi naman talaga kailangan sabihin. So that is from the leveling. And when you sharpen the information, interesting and unusual information is kept. So, paano ba mag-sharpen ang information? So, for example, Miss Darimbang, you have to get ready because our instructor or si ma'am, may dala siyang notebook talaga. And I know that the notebook is yours. Nakita ko yung pangalan mo sa notebook. So, you're sharpening the information. So, when you assimilate the information, it is modified to fit your existing beliefs and knowledge. So, how ba? How do you assimilate? So, in that example or given example, you modify or you tell more para mag-fit talaga yung sinasabi mo. So, for example, yung classmate mo is gusto talagang sabihin na galit si ma'am. So, paano ba niya minomodify? So, nakita ko na yung kilay ni ma'am is naka-furrow or nagkadikit talaga sa sobrang galit, and based talaga sa paghawak niya ng notebook mo, I can see na galit talaga siya. May nagawa ka bang iba or may nagawa ka bang masama na hindi nagustuhan ni ma'am? So, you assimilate the information. So, most of us have been really doing this in our daily lives na hindi natin napapansin. With many jobs or work, communication overload can occur when an employee or a person receives more communication than he can handle. So most of us really have this situation na sa dami ng nakukuha nating information or sa dami ng communication channel around us, we get this communication overload. So when a person is overloaded, he or she can adapt or adjust in one several ways to reduce the stress. So bakit natin i-reduce nga ang stress? Kasi stress na stress tayo dito sa overload na nangyayari. So we have omission, error, queuing, escape, using a gatekeeper, or using multiple channels. Omission. One way to manage communication overload is omission. It is a conscious decision not to process certain types of information. So may mga information tayo na hindi naman natin kailangang i-process. So for example, if a busy person or let's say a busy supervisor may let the phone ring without answering it so that she can finish her paperwork. So sometimes sa atin, sa sobrang dami ng group chat natin, hindi natin made-deny na marami talagang naka-ignore or naka-mute ng call and messages. So although this technique can work if the overload is temporary, it will be ineffective if the person misses an important communication. So for example, sa group chat natin, meron talagang mga announcement na hindi natin nakikita dahil nga naka-mute yung group chat natin. So we have to avoid missing the important things. So next is the error. In the error type of response, the person attempts to deal with every message she receives, but in so doing, each processed message includes reception error. So, hindi natin talaga maiiwasan na may mga error na hindi natin napapansin. So, for example, sinabing, kukunin mo is stapler. Bibili ka ng stapler. So, sobrang communication overload mo, pumunta ka sa isang school supplies, pagbalik mo, hindi pala stapler ang nakuha mo, kundi yung bala ng stapler. So, hindi natin hindi natin talaga maiwasan ang error. Another method of dealing with communication overload is queuing, or placing the work into a queue or waiting line. So, the order of the queue can be based on such variables as the message's importance, timeliness, or sender. So, meron tayong binabase for the queuing or yung pagpipili kung sino yung priority at hindi. Next is escape. If a communication overload is prolonged, A common response is to escape, usually through absenteeism and ultimately through resignation. So this response certainly is not beneficial to an organization, but it can be beneficial to the person if it protects her mental and physical health by relieving stress. So sometimes an escape is a good escape for the person. So we have to understand that. So next is the use of a gatekeeper. A response to communication overload used by many executives is the use of a gatekeeper, a person who screens potential communication and allows only the most important to go through. Pinaka-best example dito is yung mga taong gumagawa ng second account just to get away with the toxic environment in the Facebook or yung social media. So another thing is the use of multiple channels. The final coping response to communication overload is the use of multiple channels. So with this strategy, an organization reduces the amount of communication going to one person by directing some of it to another. So very good actually siya na reaction to communication overload kasi in an organization, there's really a need for redirecting responsibilities, redirecting communications, kasi yung isang tao hindi kinakaya ang sobrang daming responsibilities. The third problem area is the message received versus the message interpreted. So, ang pagkakaibahan niya sa problem 1 and 2 is that the problem 1 is how the message or ano yung intention ng sender for the message. Yun yung nagkakaroon tayo doon ng problem. For the second problem is the meaning or kung ano talaga yung meaning ng mga sinabing message. And this third problem is how the receiver interprets the message. So, this interpretation is affected by a variety of factors such as listening skills, listening style, emotional state, cognitive ability, and personal biases. What can be done to increase listening effectiveness? Perhaps the most important thing that we can do is to recognize that every person has a particular listening style that serves as a communication filter. So Geyer and Downey 1980 have developed the test called attitudinal listening profile. So to measure an employee's listening style, this theory postulates 6 main styles of listening. We have leisure, inclusive, stylistic, technical, empathic, and non-conforming, or sometimes known or called as listen. In leisure listening, it is practiced by good time people who listen only for words that indicate pleasure. For example, a student who is a leisure listener will pay attention only when the teacher is interesting and tells jokes. 'Di ba? Madami talagang mga estudyante na sobrang active kapag may mga dirty jokes or green-minded jokes na naririnig. So, as an employee, she is the last one to hear that employees are needed to work overtime. So, inclusive listening is the style of the person who listens for the main ideas behind any communication. So, in an hour-long meeting full of details and facts about a decline in sales, the only information this type of listener will hear is the main point that sales are down and that things had better improve. So, eto yung mga listener na pinipili lang talaga yung alin yung pakikinggan. So, sa dami-dami ng sinasabi sa kanya ng boss niya, naririnig na lang niya yung something na information na dun lang naka-highlight yung pag-uusap. So, another thing is stylistic or stylistic listening. It is practiced by the person who listens to the way the communication is presented. So, for example, may nag-present ng sobrang bilis, sobrang parang nagra-rap. So, ina-assume niya na, eto talaga, nagmamadali talaga siya kasi eto, may pupuntahan talaga. So, the speaker looks the part or both, but the stylistic listener will not listen unless the speaker's style is appropriate. So, next is the technical listening. It is the style practiced by the jackwebs of the listening world or those who want just the facts, ma'am. Or, ma'am, wag na tayong paligoy-ligoy pa. Doon na lang tayo sa mga facts. So, ito yung mga technical listeners na nagre-retain lang ng large amount of details but she does not hear the meaning of these details. So, magsasabi ka ng mga percentage or mga statistics, yun yung pinakikinggan niya. So, another one is the empathic listening or this listening style tunes into the feelings of the speaker, and of the six listening types is the most likely to pay attention to nonverbal cues. So sometimes nangyayari ito kapag super close natin yung tao na kahit anong sabihin niya, sometimes mas tinitingnan natin yung nafe-feel niya or the way she moves or the way he or she acts. Lastly is the non-conforming listening. It is practiced by the individual who attends only to information that is consistent with her way of thinking. So if the non-conforming listener does not agree with the speaker, she will not listen to what the speaker says. Furthermore, the conforming listener will pay attention only to those people she considers to be strong or to have authority. So ito yung sometimes nagiging favoritism ng mga listeners kasi kung sino lang yung boss nila, kung sino lang yung ina-idolize nila, dun lang sila makikinig. So kung putyo-putyo lang or sa tingin nila regular employee lang yung nagsasalita, hindi nila pinapakinggan. So I think that would be the last slide for my lecture. But before I end the lecture, I would like to share the tips in effective listening. So in addition to understanding how your listening style serves as a filter, you can also improve your listening effectiveness in many other ways. So one is you stop talking. You let the other person finish speaking. You focus on what the person is saying rather than on how well they are saying it or what your next response will be or what you will eat for lunch or anything. Try to understand what the other person is trying to say. Ask questions to make sure you understand the person's point, but don't ask so many questions that you distract the speaker kasi some questions can be unnecessary. Be patient and keep an open mind. If you disagree, you can always do so after the person is finished talking. Sabi nga nila, complain after you have experienced what you are complaining about. So, show the speaker you want to listen, show the speaker that you want to listen by using non-verbal cues such as making eye contact or nodding your head. Remove or resist distractions that will keep you from listening. Be silent for a few seconds after the person has finished speaking, and this will encourage the person to continue to talk, and you will be sure when they have finished talking, and it will give you time to respond calmly. And once again, I am Engineer Gemaline Galo Darimbang. Thank you very much for your patience, cooperation, and active listening.